Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tina Waddington. I'm the Executive Director of the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations. It's a pleasure to have you all here for this pop-up program as we welcome Danielle Pletka on this timely topic. The Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations aims to enrich and align the international community in Arizona through our programs and renowned speakers. We're so proud that we offer a unique opportunity for community members to learn about global issues and engage with experts worldwide. And for those of you who are interested in international affairs, who are not members of PCFR, we encourage for you to go on our website or talk to any of us here through message or send an email. And I'd like to take this quick opportunity to highlight some of our upcoming events. We host some 60 programs throughout the season. And tomorrow we will be having another virtual program with Dr. Channel Justice of Harvard University's Ukrainian Research Institute, where she will discuss the human and social costs to Ukraine as a result of Russia's invasion. Then on October 25th, Wall Street Journal journalist Junhong Wang will discuss his timely account of Jinping's rise to power, dispelling misconceptions about his leadership and highlighting his centralization of power, cult of personality, and moves toward indefinite rule. Finally, that will be followed by a members-only book club on Mr. Wang's book on October 27th. As always, thank you to our corporate members for making our work possible, our premier ambassadors, Arizona Commerce Authority, South 32, and Freeport-McMoran. To our envoy corporate members, Chicanos por la Causa, Snell and Wilmer, and WRS Investments, and of course, all of our diplomat and champion corporate members. We have too many to mention on here, but we're truly appreciative of you. And we would like to thank our international visionary donor, Ellen Schultz, who does so much for our organization, and our lifetime benefactors, Keith Galpin, JP Millon, Charles Irion, Melissa Sanderson, Karen G. Meyer, and Shoshana Tanser. Their generous gifts allow PCFR to fulfill our mission and bring you programs like this. Following the conversation between Danielle Pletka and David Merkel, our co-chair of the program, our co-chair, Claire Seckler-Merkel, will take your questions from the chat. So please feel free to post those in the chat as the program goes on. And as always, the views expressed here have been solely those of the speaker and our moderator and not those of PCFR, which takes no institutional position on policy. The moderator for today's program will be David Merkel, who is known to many of you, and he's on our board of directors and our program committee chair. And now it's a pleasure to introduce our speaker. Danielle Pletka is a distinguished senior fellow in foreign and defense policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington. And she also teaches U.S. Middle East policy at Georgetown, Washington's Walsh School of Foreign Service. Please join me in welcoming Danielle Pletka and David Merkel for this conversation today.
Tina, thanks so much, and I'm so pleased that Danny is with us, with the members and guests of PCFR. And Danny and I served together on Senate Foreign Relations Committee. A handful of us had the title senior professional staff, but there was no one that had the respect of the senators on the committee more than Danny did. That's something that continued over at AAI and expanded to other members of Congress and the executive branch. So Danny, I want to lean on your expertise as a professor and your analytical skills with AEI. And first of all, just ask you, what is Hamas? Why did they attack Israel? Why now? And with Israel celebrating 75 years of existence, 50 years since the Yom Kippur War, what's the historical precedent that we should point to for what President Biden called a bloodthirsty terrorist action?
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Claire. Tina, it's a pleasure to be here. And Dave, I'm so delighted that you led with the easiest questions because, that's the way it should be. Why did they do this? So I'm willing to bet that almost everybody who is participating in this doesn't need me to explain what Hamas is. But just a quick couple of words of background. Hamas was founded by a man named Sheikh Ahmed Yassin in the 1980s. It is intended in many ways to be a counterpoint to other Palestinian liberation organizations. And it is a product, I think, of two important things. One, a deep dissatisfaction with the Palestinian leadership over many decades, which had not delivered, if we can use that term, the liberation of Palestine that they advertised they were committed to, and a reflection of a rise in what we then called fundamentalism, Salafi, very doctrinal originist Islam. Hamas is a religious and obviously political and military organization. Sheikh Yassin is no longer with us, neither late but not lamented, I might say. And Hamas has been in power in Gaza as a result of local elections since 2006. What that effectively means is that the Palestinian Authority that was intended under the sort of follow-on to the Oslo Accords, that was intended to govern both the West Bank and Gaza, really only governs the West Bank. And even there, governs is a very generous term. And Hamas governs, and again, even more generous, the Gaza Strip, where there are about 2.2 million Palestinians. So why now? While Hamas committed the absolutely, every time I say it, I hesitate, because what happened on October the 7th was so horrifying that I feel like words don't do it justice. But Hamas committed and publicized the acts of terror and murder and rape and kidnapping that occurred on October the 7th, when they moved from Gaza with between 1,000 and 2,000 terrorists into southern Israel. They did this, but they are an organization that is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Islamic Republic of Iran. There's been a lot of hemming and hawing about whether Iran knew exactly how much they knew. Did they know they were going to do it then? Did they know they were going to do it on this day or that day, or, operational details? Don't be confused by that. Iran knew that this was coming. Iran wanted it to happen. Iran has been planning with its Palestinian and Lebanese proxies for this for well over a year. If anybody's interested, I did a piece, you will be shocked to hear, in Foreign Policy before October 7th, which we ended up recasting slightly, but which laid out Iran's plans for the Palestinians. And there are a few factors in Iran's willingness to go and go now. Of course, the symbolism of the Yom Kippur War, 50 years in a day, but much less important, just convenient, honestly speaking. Why now? A whole series of reasons. And obviously, I'm not in the pockets of the Iranian regime, oddly, so everything that I say is analytical and not necessarily the gospel. There is no gospel in the Middle East at this point. The Iranians are very upset, and were very upset about both the Abraham Accords and the impending rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The Israelis and the Saudis, both in September at the United Nations General Assembly, talked about how close they were to recognition. This is hugely important, not simply because Saudi Arabia is Saudi Arabia, but because Saudi Arabia is the heart of Sunni Islam. The king of Saudi Arabia's title is custodian of the two holy mosques. This is Mecca and Medina, the two most important places in Islam. And the Iranians believed that this would isolate them, that this was dangerous for them. There's another absolutely critical factor, probably, to my mind, more important. And Dave, I hope everybody forgives me for giving you a longish answer. I'll try and be more succinct, but you asked me a really hard question. The main reason, I believe, is because the Iranians have persuaded themselves correctly, I think, that the United States has turned its back on the region. We have had 3 presidents in a row, Biden, Trump, and Obama, all of whom have emphasized the imperative of the pivot, getting away from the Middle East. I always try to explain to people that when you pivot, you face something, but you also turn your back on something. That is certainly what the people in the Middle East think. For Obama, the joint cooperative plan of action, the Iran nuclear deal, was an effort to take one of the remaining big issues, because of course the Palestinians have not been a remaining big issue for some time, remaining big issues off the table so that the United States could move on and deal with, at that point he was thinking, China. Even Donald Trump, who reversed the Iran nuclear deal, removed the United States from it, and brought about the most significant breakthrough in in Israeli-Arab relations in decades with the Abraham Accords. Even the Abraham Accords should be understood and are understood in the Middle East as the United States looking for a way to turn its back on the region. Right? What are we trying to do? You guys work with the Israelis. They're great. They're tough. They're strong. You have a shared enemy in Iran. You guys just take care of this. And, we'll be doing other stuff. If you really need us, maybe we'll come, but probably we won't. And then, of course, you have Joe Biden, who has explicitly made clear very much the same thing. This has caused the Arabs to panic, to make dumb choices, to do dumb things. And we can talk about that. But it has also encouraged the Iranians to believe that they have impunity. And when the Iranians believe they have impunity, this is what happens. I don't even remember what your last question was, because you had a 3-parter.
I think you got it.
Good.
The Iranians often work through proxies, Hamas being one of them. I wonder, in the discussion about the possibility of the war broadening, I wonder if you could talk a bit about Hezbollah, a bit about the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and in what way can we demonstrate to Iran that they will pay a cost for the continued use of proxies to destabilize the Middle East and Israel specifically?
All right. So Iran operates its foreign policy mainly through proxies. So Hezbollah, which is the most important, the most powerful, the best armed terrorist organization in the world. They put Al-Qaeda and ISIS to shame. 150,000 missiles, precision-guided munitions, and much, much more sophisticated stuff. Orders of battle. They are a paramilitary based out of Lebanon. And they are a Lebanese political organization as well. They were not when they began in the 80s. They are a creature very much of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They were created by the IRGC, and they were a product of the very lengthy 1976 begun Lebanese civil war. When that war ended with the Taif Accords in 1992, I'm so senile, I often get my years wrong, but I believe 1992 is right. All of Lebanon's militias, armies, political armies, terrorist groups were disarmed, except Hezbollah. So Hezbollah has a government, Lebanon has a government which is dominated by Hezbollah, the political party. And then there is Hezbollah, the terrorist group that operates inside Lebanon, but also elsewhere. Iran's other proxies. This is, by the way, Iran's most important proxy. When Bashar al-Assad is losing his civil war, the Iranians bring in Hezbollah to help him. When Hezbollah can't do it, then John Kerry thought he should bring in the Russians to help, and that is how that all rolled out. But that's a very different event, so I won't rant about that for a moment. Then we have Hamas, we've talked about. PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another smaller group. What's interesting about PIJ is that they were a pretty important, potent, smaller group operating out of Gaza. And one of the things that made them very successful in a wave of suicide bombings that killed hundreds of Israelis in the early 2000s was a man named Yahya Ayash, better known as the Engineer, and he was a supreme bomb builder. The Israelis killed him. And in fact, it was really one of the beginnings of the era of targeted killings. The Israelis killed him, and PIJ really collapsed. What helped them resuscitate themselves and become the darling terrorist group of the Iranians among the Palestinians is that when Bashar al-Assad was under assault by his own people in 2011 during the Arab Spring, Hamas, which had been based in Damascus and is now based in Qatar, Hamas sided with the people against Assad. They left, they denounced Assad, and the Iranians were not happy. And the Iranians, unlike the Americans, you ask how we're going to let the Iranians know that we're not happy. The Iranians are very good at that. They cut off all money, everything. They had a summit about the future of Palestine, and they didn't invite Hamas. They gave PIJ a ton of money, love, attention, meetings with the supreme leader. And while Hamas eventually, quite quickly, came crawling back, nonetheless, PIJ is in their hearts. Don't forget, of course, totally outside our conversation, that the Iranians have other proxies as well, right? They've got the Houthis in Yemen. They've got what are called the Hashd al-Sha'bi, the popular mobilization units inside Iraq. They are extraordinarily good at the business of building, using, manipulating, and then claiming credit for, but no responsibility for, the actions of their proxies. How do we tell the Iranians that we are not happy with them? Well, if I were king of the world, it might be different because I have rather more nasty ideas. What I would recommend immediately to the Biden administration is that in the last 3 years, there has been a period of relaxed sanctions enforcement to the tune of $35 billion for the Iranians. They export about 1.5, give or take, million barrels a day of oil, despite the fact that we, the US government, the US president, is intended to sanction anyone who buys oil from Iran. So they've had an enormous cash windfall. They also have had cash windfalls from the unfreezing of their monies that are kept in Iraq, South Korea, and elsewhere. I don't believe that the $6 billion that was released by the president in the week before this attack contributed to the attack, as some have accused. No, but it contributed to the assumption made by the Iranians that the United States is not a player anymore in the region, that we are weak, that they understand us, and that they have us wired. All sanctions reimposed, all sanctions. We proved during the Trump administration that the United States is capable of imposing enormous economic pain on the Iranians, enormous, okay? Simply through the power of the dollar. We need to return to that. That's number one. Obviously, we need to stop the disbursement from Qatar of that $6 billion. In addition, we need to start shutting their other operations down. What does that mean? It means taking a much harder line on Lebanon. I love Lebanon. I love the people of Lebanon. They are the victims of these dreadful terrorists and these dreadful thugs in Tehran. But Lebanon has not done enough. The Lebanese armed forces have not done enough. We need to do something about Hezbollah. We need to cut off their access to cash, cut off their access to travel. We need to stop Iranians from moving in and out. Do you all realize that Lufthansa flies nonstop from Frankfurt to Tehran? Yeah, that's got to end. All of it. All of these are just, look, screw tightening. For me, we need to take a stand for the Iranian people. Okay, there have been 3 times in the last decade and a half where the Iranian people have stood up to their government and been brutally repressed. In the first instance, in the Green Revolution in 2009, Barack Obama waited 2 weeks to say anything about it. In 2019, similarly, we did very little to support the Iranian people. And in 2022, with the murder of Mahsa Amini, we again refused to stand other than mildly rhetorically for the Iranian people. It's time for us to tell them that we are actually with them and against the regime. So those are some of the things that I think we need to do to signal to the Iranians. We also have 2 carrier battle groups in the region. The Israelis tell me that if Hezbollah gets involved, as the Iranians have been warning every single hour on the hour since the 7th, if Hezbollah gets involved, that the United States may, in fact, make some use of those carrier battle groups in helping to take out some sites. I don't know if the Israelis want them to do that, and I don't know if Joe Biden will do it, but that's what I hear.
Thank you. It's really something. I mean, what you said about the contours of the relationship with Iran, that Obama talked about the region needing to be shared between Iran and the Gulf Emirates, and as you said, the accessible reserves for Iran were at $4 billion when Biden came to the White House, and now they're many times more. President Biden on the 10th talked about that Israel should do a sudden, decisive, and overwhelming attack on Hamas, and they have taken steps that have resulted in civilian casualties in Gaza, and Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005. So where is the Israeli population now relative to Gaza? Do they feel like they can live with Hamas in Gaza, or has that attitude changed? And I also would ask you to weave into that the issue of the hostages, because of course in the past Israel has paid a great price for hostages, and there's a great number of hostages now. But things have changed after October 7th. So where is the options for Israel in the future in Gaza relative to Hamas, and what is their calculation relative to the hostages that Hamas holds?
So right now, the Israelis are moving very deliberately. They're not going on anybody's timeline except their own. They have said that it will take as long as it takes. Months is certainly what the estimation is inside Israel and probably outside as well. Right? This is not going to happen, tomorrow and end next week. That's number one. Israel has said, from the far left to the far right, total national unity, that when this is over, Hamas will no longer exist in any form. It will not be able to rebuild. It will not be able to be a political party. It will not be. That is their determination. That has not been, in the past, in Israel's many wars, their calculus. Then again, they didn't lose what in America would have been 40 to 45,000 people killed in a single day. This is something they've never experienced. This is the most Jews killed since the Holocaust. And so they are going to address the leadership, which is what they're doing now. They've taken out 8 senior leaders. They are going to address the weapons caches, of which there are innumerable. And then there's going to be a ground invasion. And that is not going to be pretty no matter what. How do the people of Gaza feel? There are 2 kinds of people in Gaza. people who are victims of Hamas and people who are fans. It doesn't divide up the way I want it to. I'll be honest with you. I have a lot of Palestinian friends. I've spent plenty of time in Gaza. Polling suggests that there's a lot of support for Hamas. Then again, how do you get here? You know, if Hamas has controlled the territory since 2006, it's not a surprise that a tyranny like Hamas that eliminates its enemies, that eliminates so-called collaborators, that controls the education system, that controls the media, that controls every other part, has educated their people to be bloodthirsty killer supporters. It's really sad. Sad for them. Sad for them. What happens then? The hostages, I'm not very sanguine for, I'll be honest with you. Who takes a 3-month-old baby, a 9-month-old baby? What do you do with a 9-month-old baby? Why do you do that? How do you take a 90-year-old Holocaust survivor? They took all these people, 199 that have been documented, maybe more. I think some of them are already dead. That's what Hamas has said. The Qataris are trying to get the foreign nationals among the hostages out. That will, I think their calculus is that will soften support from Europe, right? Because there are a lot of Europeans. And these are dual passport holders. But you don't decapitate a baby. You don't disembowel a pregnant woman and then kill her fetus and then shoot her in the head and then say to yourself, I should probably save these hostages. So my expectations are very low, unfortunately.
Let me ask one more question before turning to the audience, and I would encourage those in the audience. I know there's already been a lot of questions, but I'd encourage anyone that has questions. Danny, I'm interested in the neighbors. A country that has occupied Gaza and has a corridor with Gaza that has closed that access is not only Israel but is Egypt. So what is Egypt's attitude on this, and more importantly, Turkey and Qatar, who have Hamas leadership and support Hamas in their country, should the U.S. change our policy relative to those countries, or should we expect, if Israel is able to assassinate people in the Islamic Republic of Iran, that they're probably going on a program to assassinate Hamas leadership in those two countries?
That's a great question. You know, when you and I worked on Capitol Hill and countries betrayed our interests and countries threatened our nationals and countries endorsed the murder of Americans, our view was zero tolerance. There's been an evolution here in Washington. And I'm sorry, if everybody can hear my dog barking, I think the lawn guys are outside. Okay. I know it's unprofessional, but they're so badly behaved, I just can't do anything. Anyway, coming back to this, look, I want to say two things about support for the Palestinians in the Arab world. Okay. Let me put it in the foreign policy professional speak that I know everybody admires. These countries suck, okay? And when I say that, I don't mean that they suck because they support the Palestinians. I mean that they suck because they say they support the Palestinians, but they don't, right? They don't care about the Palestinian people, about their plight, about their life, about who manages them, about whether they're happy, sad, have money, have food, nothing, okay? They occasionally pump a little money in. This is rhetorical support, period. And now we see that, right? Because the King of Jordan, recipient, by the way, of tens of billions of dollars in US assistance, and the Egyptian president, also recipient of tens of billions of dollars in US assistance, both canceled a meeting with the President of the United States today over the supposed Israeli, but in fact, Palestinian jihad's bombing of this hospital parking lot in Gaza. Okay. Now, they won't let Palestinian refugees in. Not from the West Bank, not from Gaza, not across the Rafah crossing, not across the Jordan River. No way, no how. They've said it more than once. No Palestinians may enter. Right? That tells you about the quality of these leaders and the loyalty to the United States for all of the support we've given them. The Qataris, a pox on their house, honestly. The Qataris, who are the godfathers of Al Jazeera, I don't know whether anybody watches Al Jazeera. This is nastiness personified. This is Russia Today with diamond earrings, okay? This is a television station that is documented to have collaborated with Al-Qaeda in planning to kill Americans in Iraq. This is an organization that the Israelis believe is plotting with Hamas to televise attacks. The Qataris hosted our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, last week, and the next day invited the head of Hamas and President Raisi of Iran. Now, maybe they're doing shuttle diplomacy, or maybe those are just their friends, because of course the head of Hamas lives in luxury in. So the Qataris, we have a huge airbase there. It should be gone. The Qataris are sponsors of terrorism, period. The last one, Turkey. You know, years and years ago, with a friend of mine who was my counterpart at the Center for American Progress, and you all can hear I'm pretty conservative. He is not. We wrote a piece together about the problem of the one-way ratchet in all of these organizations. Right, the European Union, you get in, you're in. NATO, you get in, you can do anything. Right. You can refuse to support us during the Iraq War. You can host the Muslim Brotherhood. You can host Hamas. You can murder lots of people in Syria. You can be against the Kurds that we're working with in Syria. And all of that is fine because you're in NATO. That's the problem with Turkey. And we have not had a serious conversation inside NATO, which is a consensus organization, so nothing can be done. Right? We have not had a serious conversation inside NATO about the risks to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization from Turkey. And we need to. And we haven't. And I've said so. Lots of other people more important and louder than me have said so. It's a nightmare. And this is what happens. Dave, you know this. When you let things fester, they don't go away. They just get worse.
Claire, can we go to the audience with questions, or can I keep going? Because I've got many more.
Yeah, I'm sure you do have many more. There are quite a few from the audience, so let's turn to that. And I'm going to try to combine them a little bit on theme and things that you all haven't touched on already. To start with, how do you think the political instability in the US and Israel perhaps factored into the attack from Hamas? And this is also tied to just general intelligence assessment, the US intelligence capabilities, Israeli intelligence capabilities, both failures seemingly on this issue. What are your thoughts?
Add in there Egypt.
Okay, add in there Egypt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the Egypt question is actually kind of interesting as well. So absolutely they contribute. Are you kidding? Look at the House of Representatives. We look like a circus. Okay. We don't have a speaker. We can't agree about aid to Ukraine. President won't talk about aid to Ukraine. President's far left is completely out of control. House of Representatives has a small group of people who are apparently in charge of everything, despite the fact that there are only 10 or 15 of them. And the American people are at daggers drawn with each other. Yeah, that contributes. And absolutely the turmoil in Israel contributed. The Iranians were watching that very closely. And when reservists threatened, appallingly, I thought, actually, not, it didn't happen in the event, but threatened that they would not show up for a call up, the Iranians were delighted. The Iranians believed that the foundations of Israel as a country were crumbling, right? And by the way, the rhetoric from the Biden administration, from people like Tom Friedman, only contributed to that, right? Israel is in a constitutional crisis. Israel is on its last legs. Israel is crumbling before our eyes. You know what? No, it isn't. No, it wasn't. It was having a political crisis. We do that all the time. Donald Trump was just our president. We are in the midst of a 3-year political crisis over this, right? This is a man who's been indicted 91 times. He is the former president of the United States. Of course, but we are not crumbling, right? Our Constitution is not crumbling. The problem is that foreigners see this through their prism, not through our prism, right? They don't think to themselves, ooh, crowds out in the street, that just shows the strength of American or Israeli democracy. They think, ooh, crowds out in the street, you're threatening our rule, right? That's what they think when it happens in Iran. That's what they think when it happens in all of these other tyrannies. And so when they see it, they say to themselves, that's what's happening to you. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, the intel failure, a monstrous intel failure. Oh my God. And not just intelligence, So Israel has, like we do, a lot of different intelligence agencies. It's got the Mossad, it's got the Shabak, the Shin Bet, the domestic FBI. Like they've got police intelligence, they've got naval intelligence, they've got air. They've got it all, much as we do. And they all miss this, but it's worse. They didn't just miss this. They have become so confident and so dependent upon their technical electronic means, and so confident in their ideological assessment of Hamas's motives and thinking, that they didn't really have any soldiers along the border. So that when those guys came across, all they needed to do was breach the border, breach through cyber and through physical kinetic activity, the various listening and intelligence stations, which they did. Right? Because they knew a lot more than the Israelis ever believed, and go in. But it's worse. No one showed up, right? The second it started at 6 a.m., people were calling, hey, help, rockets, they're really starting. Now we see people. Hours, and no one showed up, right? This is a failure of epic proportions. Oh, and by the way, we didn't see it either. Not only did we not see it, we had no sense of it. And we should have, because this form of this plan has been sitting for 1 year and 4 months on the Supreme Leader's website in Iran. Yeah, and been translated. So did the Egyptians warn the Israelis? The Egyptians are very plugged into the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is officially part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Maybe. The problem is I don't trust the Egyptian President Sisi as far as I can throw him. And so I don't know.
Great answer to a tough question. Next one, Saudi Arabia and Iran have engaged in a Cold War via proxy similar to the US-Russia Cold War. What are your thoughts on a China-Russia-Iran proxy against the West? And further, would you comment on how you would advise American businesses to navigate the geopolitical risk in Middle Eastern markets?
Oh, that is a hard one. Look, George Bush talked about an axis of evil, and everybody said George Bush was an idiot, and that was all stupid, and what kind of rhetoric are you using? And now, actually, there's an axis of evil. Yes, Americans hate these words, and I don't speak for any of you folks in Phoenix. We're all much deeper and smarter, but in general, the American character is not one that wants to believe in evil. We want to believe that people make mistakes. We also want to believe that a lot of people overseas are like us, but misdirected, misadvised, bad thinking, but that their motivations and ideas are fundamentally not that different. That's just not true. I had this conversation with my daughters because they sent me a beautiful, beautiful quote from Anne Frank. I'll try and find it while we're talking about this. But Right, I'll tell you guys, because you'll enjoy it. It is really a wonder I haven't dropped all my ideals, because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them, because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I can't hold my hopes on a foundation of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the approaching thunder. I can feel the suffering of millions. And yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come out right one of these days, that this cruelty will end and that peace and tranquility will return again. It's a beautiful, beautiful quote, and incredible from a girl so young. And I said to my girls, but she was wrong. It didn't come out right. She died. And so did 6 million other Jews. And so did 44 million other people, right? And why? Because the Nazis, the fascists, and the Japanese were evil. And this is the thing we have a hard time contemplating. We think we can manage them, we can contain them, we can do something about it. And the answer is, some things are just evil. And that is what these three countries now represent. It's China, with millions of Uyghurs in concentration camps, Russia attacking Ukraine. You guys don't need to hear this from me. You're going to hear about Ukraine tomorrow. That'll be amazing. And I'm sorry that this war in Israel has put that on the back burner, because it remains enormously important. Last part, how does business navigate? What is that line about? Like, about how you navigate a crocodile's mouth? With caution. I don't see much good news coming out of the region. Obviously, oil prices are going to spike. There's a lot of nervousness about what's happening. I think the United States, one of the purposes in Joe Biden's visit was to tell the Israelis to kind of, take it easy, don't, get it over with fast, because yeah, it's going to be economically disruptive. It's going to be inflationary. I don't worry about your investments in Saudi Arabia, your investments in the United Arab Emirates. If you're in Lebanon, you should definitely get out now. As indeed we are evacuating personnel from Lebanon right now. But yeah, so, these are not the words of your Goldman Sachs advisor. This is just what I see now. I think the Gulf will end up being a risky place, but I don't worry about retaliation against American interests in any of our crappy ally countries.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions swirling around the idea of, is there a possibility or even a thought that Russia had something to do with this, to do just what you said and take the attention off of Ukraine and what's happening there? Are they connected? Is it through Syria? Hezbollah? No.
Russia?
I actually had a conversation about this on another Zoom conversation, and there was broad consensus. Do you disagree, Dave?
No, I just wanted to add to this that obviously Jordan and Israel have benefited from kind of Russia handling the disengagement from agreement with regard to Syria, turning off the S-300 when Israel wanted to go after Iranian troops. So I'm curious whether Russia may make things more difficult for Israel on the Syrian border, not by taking an active measure, but by not doing what they've done before, or does Syria just want to be left out of this one?
The Syrians have been brought into it by the Iranians. There are some Palestinian groups based out of Syria. There are some other extremist groups based out of Syria, and they have been sporadically attacking. So on the Israeli-Syrian border, so there have been a number of cross-border attacks. The Israelis bombed the bejesus out of Damascus airport day before yesterday, I think. Because I suspect for two reasons. One, resupply. And another, a message to the Syrians that perhaps just maybe you'd like to just sort of stay out of this because, you know, last time you took us on, it really didn't end that well for you. So I don't think that's true. I think the really notable thing in what you said is absolutely correct, is that Bibi Netanyahu has believed that he has a special relationship with Putin. He has believed that Israel was able to operate correctly in this instance with impunity over Syria, despite the Russian emplacement of very serious anti-aircraft batteries, right? So they allowed them to hit Iranian targets inside Syria without interference, some coordination. And so there was this belief on the part of the prime minister that they had this understanding. Bibi has rightly been raked over the coals for it, because it was one of the reasons why Israel was not full-throated in its support of Ukraine. Really? Seriously? You can't support Ukraine? What an outrage. They've been more generous towards the Ukrainians in recent months, but still. For the Russians, though, I don't think they have any real options. The Russians have withdrawn most of their serious forces out of Syria because they need them, because, you know, what's the word I used before? Because they suck. They're a terrible military, and they need the guys. They need every man they can get. So they've got some remaining troops and some materiel inside Syria, but I would say that they're not going and looking for trouble, for more trouble than they already have. You know, that I think is my estimation. If anybody's really interested in the sort of maneuvers that go on here, my colleagues at AEI have something called the Critical Threats Project. It's criticalthreats.org, and there they are looking at not just the day-to-day Iran stuff, the day-to-day war with Hamas. They've looked a lot at what the Russians were doing in Syria. They also do Ukraine with our colleagues at the Institute for the Study of War, and that's amazing material, more detail than you ever wanted, but very interesting.
Thank you. I'm going to take a question now from our president, Luke Wentz, who spent some time living in Lebanon and said, my experience living in Lebanon was that Hezbollah and the Muslim Brotherhood was akin to a Rotary or a Kiwanis club. Can you speak to the relationship between Hamas and most Palestinians in Gaza, as well as there are comments being made from government officials in Egypt that Israel has said that they'll bomb aid trucks sent into Gaza. Is that a legitimate concern?
You're a lucky man if your experience with Hezbollah in Lebanon was akin to a Rotary or Kiwanis. My friend Lokman Slim, who ran an organization for the Shia in southern Lebanon, people who didn't want to be associated with Hezbollah, Shia clerics, but also a think tank that really cared a lot about the future of Lebanon. He was found 2 years ago, shot in the back of the head in a parking lot. That's Hezbollah. I don't know what Rotary does in your town, but I sure as hell hope that's not what they're up to. Hezbollah controls the airport. Hezbollah is also, by the way, involved in Captagon smuggling, a massive drug smuggling business that ends up, here. So for those of you who care about that kind of thing, Hezbollah is involved in that as well, along with a lot of the other terrorist groups in that neck of the wood. The relationship of the people with Hamas is a very difficult one. You're talking about 2.2 million people in an area that isn't intended for 2.2 million people. You are talking about a 4% growth rate, not of the economy, as I corrected one of our economists, but of the population, the highest birth rate in the world. Hamas shoots rockets regularly before this war at Israel. A large percentage of them land in Gaza and kill people. Hamas likes shooting rockets, but they need material for it, and so they dig up the water pipes because that's how you can do the shoulder and some of the other ones. So there's no reliable running water in large parts of Gaza. Hamas has so well, the head of Hamas is apparently worth $4 billion. No one else in Gaza is worth $4 billion. Do they like him? Do they like it? There are some who like it, right? And there are a lot who don't. There are a lot who, that's why there hasn't been another election since 2006. So that's the issue there. What was the latter part of the question? Sorry, I apologize.
No, you're just fine. Is there any credibility to the concern that Israel will bomb aid trucks?
Oh, that's right. That's right. So, two things. I think that the Israelis are willing to let certain resupply in, but they are not willing to let anything in that unless they are certain it will not go to sustain Hamas, that it will not be stolen by Hamas, and that it will not be taken by Hamas. You know, I as we watch this, you have this sort of, one has this intellectual response, right? Which is, well, of course they need to. I mean, damn, right? They should let aid trucks in because people are suffering there and it's war and it's terrible. And I think that you need to see this as, 1944 for them, right? Anyone who's watched Band of Brothers will know, we didn't care. Okay? You need to lose was our attitude. And the sooner you lose and the harder you lose and the faster you lose, the better it is. Because you know what? Then we lose fewer of our people. This is not a skirmish. This is not an engagement. This is not an intifada or an intercession of events. This is total war for the state of Israel. And they are going to act accordingly. And they are ready, and in every single case, will be judged for that. There will be innocent people who are victims of this. There is no question. But you know what? Unfortunately, that is on Hamas. Every Palestinian who dies is on Hamas, because they are the ones who not just started this, they are the ones who brutalized and savage attack on innocent civilians, not, by the way, in any occupied territory, but in the state of Israel.
There's lots of questions swirling around. How does this end? What happens? Hamas is pushed into a smaller place. Would they not be eliminated, but be given an opportunity to regroup? What does your analysis look like for the day after? I presume that means after fighting stops. Is there rooting out Hamas in a larger global concern relationship to peace? Can we actually get the Jordanians, Egyptians, and Gulf countries to commit to some type of a Arab Gulf agreement, peacekeeping force for Gaza and or the West Bank? That's a lot. Sorry.
No, we've talked, but no, look, we've talked about this. Obviously, I've talked to my colleagues about this. We've all talked about this. AEI did an event on this on Monday where we talked a lot about the outcome, and I commend it to anybody who's interested. It's on our homepage, aei.org. And we disagreed about this, me and my colleague, Ken Pollock. Ken said, yes, Arab peacekeeping force, something, can't be the Americans, can't be the Israelis, obviously can't be Hamas, and maybe an Arab peacekeeping force. Ken himself has written a book entitled Armies of Sand, which is about Arab armies. These are terrible militaries, not just not good at doing what they do, but at discipline, at order, at keeping peace, at waging war. Nothing, right? You wonder, you want, if you're not sure, just go look at Yemen, okay? Just go look at Syria. I think that an Arab peacekeeping force is a terrible idea, and I don't think it will happen because I don't think any of them want to be engaged any more than they have to in questions relating to the Palestinians. because that's the honest truth. They'll give them money. They'll tweet endlessly in their support. They'll make lots and lots of important phone calls to each other. But will they actually set foot and send peacekeeping forces? Not in a million years. That is my guess. I'm happy to come back in 6 months and be told I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be. What happens then? This is a $64,000 question. Hamas cannot rule. There will be an interregnum. Okay, Fatah, which rules the Palestinian Authority, the Palestine Liberation Organization. They are not the terrorists that Hamas are. They are terrorists of a kind, but certainly not like Hamas. And they're much more importantly thieves and kleptocrats. They have a president who is in his 80s and is in the 18th year of his 4-year term. We need to help the Palestinians clean up their act. We need to help them actually build a government that serves the Palestinian people. We need to help them build a government of institutions and leaders that prioritizes the economy and education and the well-being of the Palestinian people, not the eradication of the Jewish people. Okay? That's it. That's what we need to do. We will have an opportunity to do that. We should have started years ago. We have spent a fortune in these places, and look what we have got. We have not prioritized this. We have simply patted ourselves on the back for having poured hundreds of millions of dollars in and peace processed till the cows came home with no results. The right answer is to help the Palestinians build a government that leads from Ramallah, the West Bank, and Gaza, that helps Gaza reconstruct itself, that helps the Palestinian territories become a place where people want to live and a place that Israel can make peace with, so that eventually there can be a two-state solution. That's what ought to happen.
That is a fantastic answer. And unfortunately, our time has come. So that will be our ending answer. I would, before I get to the thanks, I would commend all of you to read her article in Foreign Policy. It is fantastic. And it also really gives you a lot more meat on the role of Iran. And I think you would all enjoy it. So with that, we are so grateful for you. I will take note of the fact that you offered to come back in 6 months and see where things were. We would love to have you back as well. David, thank you for moderating. It is wonderful to see the two of you chat, and you've just left us with so much great information of a really horrible situation. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming so quickly and giving us so much great information. We appreciate
anything from my old Foreign Relations Committee family. And I mean that. Thank you all so much for having me. And thanks for your patience with my answers. Take care, everybody.
you. You too.
Thank you, Dan.
Bye.